This session is about wrapping HTML5 with native wrappers. And I'm Matti Paksula. I come from a company called AppGyver. There's a few more from our company over there. And since we're quite small bunch here, just feel free to interrupt me anytime you want to ask or clarify something. And I have plenty of time for questions at the end. So, about my company, we are AppGyver. That rhymes with MacGyver. And we've been around 2 years with a team of 9. We're based in San Francisco and in Helsinki. And we recently launched our product called AppGyver Steroids. That's a HTML5 wrapper. I will show that quickly at the very end of this presentation. But before that, I try to talk more generally about the problems and things with HTML5 wrapping. And how many of you know PhoneGap? Like everybody. How many of you know AppGyver Steroids? Like 3. Without you 2. So 1. Good. So I just want to run very quickly through this all so that this is the kind of thing that should you be making apps or mobile websites. So apps, definitely, because of monetization. That's very easy with apps. You have in-app purchases and that. Then the discovery is another thing. The apps are distributed in app stores. And people know where to download the app from. They don't have to remember URL. Then it's a way better way to engage users. You can send out push notifications. And then you get access to hardware that you don't with mobile websites. You can use geolocation and camera and whatnot. Then, when it comes to making apps, you can go full native or hybrid. If you go fully native, you need to master Objective-C, Java, C++, and then you need to learn those vendor SDKs. And when it comes to hybrid, it's a combination of HTML5 and native. The nice thing is that you don't have to learn or you don't have to know anything about native coding, usually. And the main points with hybrid versus native are that it's just CSS, HTML, JavaScript. That makes it very easy to style across different platforms. So you can use the same views and in Android and in iOS. Then you get way more easier OS upgrades. So for example, now that iOS 7 is out, you just have to fix minor things. You don't have to fix the whole native runtime. And you can reuse your code from your mobile website or from your other web things you might have. And one very nice thing is that, and Apple also allows this, you can update your apps without resubmitting it again to the App Store or any new approval. So you just submit it once, and then you can update your app, because you are allowed to change the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS without changing the purpose of the app, of course. But like minor adjustments, you can totally do those. And then HTML is great for rapid prototyping. So if you make the first version of the app, just do it with HTML and then go native later if you need to. And one thing that people don't realize is that many of the native apps have embedded web views, like embedded browsers. So many apps already are some kind of hybrids. They just don't advertise that. And if you look at the cost to make an app, and you're targeting like 3 platforms, so iOS, Android, and Windows Phone 8, then you have very few developers who are capable of doing those, and you basically need 3 developers or 1 very good developer. And then it takes some time to do that app, and because those devs are really expensive, it will cost a lot. And you need to code your app separately on different platforms. HTML5 kind of changes that, because then you have the developers, you have web devs, and the time to make the app kind of stays the same, but because you can reuse and web devs are much cheaper, then the cost to make the app is significantly lower. So a hybrid app, it's basically a full screen web view, web browser, that's wrapped in a native runtime. And so it contains the CSS, JavaScript, HTML, and then it gets packaged so that you can upload that to Apple App Store or Google Play and to those stores. And the nice thing is that you get access to hardware, meaning camera and those things. Plus, you can always go a bit native. You can add some native functionality there with the plugins. And the most common way to do this is with PhoneGap. And there's a bit confusion with the naming. It's sometimes known as Cordova, but Cordova is the open source part of it. PhoneGap will stay free and open source forever. And it's the industry standard. There are other solutions as well, but PhoneGap is the one that everybody knows. So PhoneGap comes with camera, geolocation, contacts, and you can use plugins to do push notifications and stuff like that. And this is how PhoneGap programming looks like. So on the top of there's you create a new contact, and then you add some fields to that contact. And in the very end, you say contact.save, and then the contact gets saved in the device's contacts app. And the PhoneGap APIs, or the way how you program it, influences a lot W3C standards working group. So, for example, the device API working group, they use the PhoneGap's API as a input for their work. And so it's kind of hard to explain how it really works, but basically it works like this. So once you save contact.save, then that's a special object, and it sends some kind of message to the native code, and then the native does the native thing, and then it executes a callback in the web view. And once you get the callback, you can prompt the user that contact created. Then you know that it's done for sure. And if it fails for some reason, then it executes failure callback. And you can continue from there. So the point is that the communication is always that the web view sends a message, and then something really atomic and small happens, and then the execution is given back to the web view. And if something is missing, it's really easy to extend with the plugins. And PhoneGap is really great because there's plenty of open source plugins available. And for example, if you want to use native maps in your app instead of JavaScript, Leaflet, Google Maps, you can just search for a plugin, and you get a plugin for iOS and Android where you can use the native map. That's way better than what you can do with Leaflet or Google Maps. And if you're still missing something, it's really not super hard, because you don't have to learn everything about native coding. You can just do the really, really small thing there. So for example, this Echo plugin, that's the smallest possible thing you can do. A plugin that basically just sends a message, and then the native code echoes that message back to you, to the web view. And here's the JavaScript part. That's the same for all the platforms. So there's the actual implementation. It's 4 lines. So it's just called Cordova.exec, and then you request a plugin named Echo or a feature named Echo, and then you give out some string to it. And there's the usage. So you say Echo and then the message, and then you give a success callback to it. And on Android, it fits on one screen, the whole implementation. So you just extend the Cordova plugin, and then you implement two methods, or actually one method that's execute, and then that execute calls the actual implementation that just echoes the message. And on iOS, it's similar. And this is the level of native coding you actually need to learn when you do a plugin. Then about debugging, that's somewhat complicated because you cannot use the standard debugger that comes with Xcode, for example, because everything happens inside the web view in your app. So you can use Winery that supports all the platforms. And it basically is like Chrome DevTools or Safari Web Inspector. But it's quite limited. But this is the only way to go with, for example, Android and Tizen and those platforms. But then for iOS and Mac, there's the Safari Web Inspector that supports also hybrid apps. So you can just hook your iPhone to your Mac and then use that. And it also works with the simulator. And this is like way better than Winery. But the problem really is that hybrid is not enough to make your app feel good, because traditionally, hybrid app is a full screen web view that fakes the UI with CSS and JavaScript. And it's really hard to mimic native kind of feeling of the app. And we believe that true hybrid also includes hybrid UI, which means that you have some of the native elements there, and you still do the actual app with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So in this example, there's the native navigation bar that shows the title, and then the web view is in the middle, and then on the bottom there are 3 tabs with different documents. So the first one lists starters, then the second one lists mains. So basically you can use 3 different HTML documents on those. That makes it way simpler to actually implement. And you get the native kind of feeling and the speed that comes with that. Then some of the elements of hybrid UI might be, in addition to multiple web views and tabs, the modal windows that come on top of the application and on top of the tabs. And then a Facebook-style drawer, meaning that you can slide it from the left side or right side. And then, of course, native animations that perform way better than CSS3 animations. And here's a video of one app we did that uses basic hybrid UI. So in the middle, there's the actual web view that bounces natively. And then on the top, on the bottom, there's the tabs. There's 5 tabs. And you can list content. And when you open up a section in the app, it gives you details. And then nice native like scrolling. And the nice thing is that when you go back and forth the tabs, it maintains the same state without any extra effort, because all of the web views are executing at the same time. And so this is very great for data-driven apps and consumer REST APIs, for example. But then you can always do stuff like this with Canvas and JavaScript. Like you can actually shoot some animals there, for example. So there are different kind of hybrids. There are hybrid apps and hybrid apps with hybrid UI. And the hybrid app was that one full screen browser, and you have to make the UI native-like with CSS, HTML, and that. And the products for that are PhoneGap, Sencha, Isenium, and some others. And then those usually come with some kind of UI framework, CSS framework, like Topcode, Sencha, Kendo UI. But then you can go also like totally hybrid with hybrid UI. And then you get tabs, modals, and those. And there are products like Trigger.io Forge, Monacan, AppCover, Steroids. That's us. And you can still use the UI frameworks, such as Sense Touch, with those, so you can combine best of both worlds in there. So, the problems. When the app starts, it loads a document from the app bundle itself. So usually the URL of the web view is something like this. Really, really long. And because of the file URL, you cannot use relative paths that are relative to the root. So your code gets cluttered with ////////////////////////////////// So one way to solve this is to actually run a built-in web server. So you could, for example, in iOS, you can run Cocoa HTTP web server that would serve the documents from the actual device. So you basically need to have some port opened there, other than 80, because that 80 requires root access. And when you do this, you get these kind of nice paths for your scripts and images and whatnot that start with the slash. So no matter where you are in the app. But the problem is that the ports open can fail, and if there are two apps running on the same device that use the same port, then the app will just crash. And it's too complex for this. And then in iOS, for example, there's a method in WebView that the WebView, when it starts loading a request, you get a callback. So you can just catch that request and then return the document for that without opening any ports. So you can fake it. So now you just catch localhost, and then anything. And then you return that anything.html from your app bundle. So there's no ports needed, and it makes the programming way more simpler. The other problem is caching, because the web views are very eager to cache, and no matter what you try to do there, like cache, invalidate, whatever, it doesn't help. And applying timestamps helps, but then again, it makes it super complex to program and debug your app. But because the URLs don't matter, you can just timestamp the whole directory there. So if you put everything in the timestamp directory, and then it just works. It invalidates nicely everything. Then there's one problem more that are the single-page apps, because those just suck. They are really hard to implement and maintain, because it's just like you just do it with JavaScript, and when you want to make a transition there, you need to fake it, kind of, with JavaScript. And there's no need, because the app is fully offline. There's no network lag. And single-page apps are great in web, but in offline, there's no need. And if you do something that uses hybrid UI, you can do multi-page apps, so that only one document is responsible for the one thing. So there's one HTML document that is responsible for listing things, and then another one that is responsible for showing that. And then you get nice transitions between the documents with native UI. And it's way more nicer to do it like this, because it's like the web used to be.
Does that mean when you say one document, you mean like one view controller or activity for one web view?
Like one HTML document, and then another HTML document. I will show you very quickly how it works. So, for example, when going from artists to show.html, there's a problem that the screen will flash white for 20 milliseconds, and that's not native. But if you use hybrid UI, meaning native UI, you can do something like this. So here's a different document, and here's another one. So you can do native transitions between those two web views. And this solves the flashing. It still flashes, but you don't see it. And then one question is that how do you send messages across the web views? And you can do something like HTML5 web messaging, the standard API to do that. So you say window.postMessage with a JSON object, and that gets sent to every web view there. And then those web views can listen for those events there. So in this example, you have the artist tab selected, and then in the music tab, you want something to change when something's changed inside the artist tab. So the artist tab, the HTML JavaScript there just sends out the message, and then the music tab that runs music.html just listens for those messages and acts based on those. So it's a very nice way to do evented programming. Then, because we're not doing it as a single page app, you don't have control of the view that is visible at any given time, because the user can change it across the tabs, for example. So you can implement there the page visibility API, and then the document itself knows when if it's hidden or not, and gets events, the visibility change events based on the visibility changes. So when the tab becomes visible or loses the visibility, you get an event. Same goes if the app goes to background or resumes to the foreground, or if the view gets shown in a model and so forth. Then, if you open many web views, many people think that it will consume a lot of memory, but it doesn't, because the web views are super, super light in memory. So we did an experiment that we opened 28 tabs, and then we had to zoom in a lot to see any changes there in the memory usage. So here we start opening those web views, and then once we remove those all, the memory usage goes back to the same level. So the memory is always freed after the views are freed. But overall, it's just a tiny percentage of the total memory. So then we launched this product 2 months ago. I would like to show you some things we did there. So basically, Steroids is a hybrid UI framework. We are fully compatible with PhoneGap, and we have hybrid UI. And if something's missing, you can extend with PhoneGap plugins. We only support iOS and Android currently, but we are working with Windows Phone 8 soon. And then we do support styling of the hybrid UI, so you can go like iOS 7 style or iOS 6 style, and then there you can customize all the native elements that we have there. Our development environment works as a Node package. So it's a command line interface tool called Steroids. And then there's an AppGyver scanner companion app to that. So you just download those two and you're good to go. And I have the tool here. So once you type in Steroids, you get the usage information. And then I have a project here that follows PhoneGap structure. And now when I say Steroids connect, it opens up a server that allows me to start a simulator. And then this companion app starts here. I could also use my real device, but the Wi-Fi here doesn't work so. But basically this is what you get with your device. So here's the app. And here's the views that For example, this is an animation. So this is one document here, index.html, and here's animation.html. And what just happened now? Awesome. You can see the data indicator. It's trying to reload something from the internet. Let me just try one more time. Alright, the Wi-Fi doesn't work. Just try one more time. Yep. Yeah, once I disable the Wi-Fi. So anyway, you can perform native animations and switch between documents, and the state stays whatever you do. Then I have a few more things. Hopefully I'm able to show you. So the way you configure your native UI is that by opening up application.config file, you can configure that the tabs are enabled or disabled, and the initial URLs that you want to load in the tabs. So if you want to have 3 tabs, you just copy paste that, and then you start up the server and the companion app. And the companion app loads the application and boots it up. So it doesn't compile that. So now we have 3 tabs with 3 different documents at the same time. Well, then we have also some generators available that generate you some code. We have examples like how to do the animations and even how to build a drum machine. So let's just do that, but I'm not able to run the generators because we download stuff from internet, so I have pre-generated some files here. All right. And now the companion app. And we have drum machine. Then you can learn how this was done by opening the documents. So we have inline to CSS for easy modification here, but here's the drum pads, and you can make some changes. And then when you just hit enter, it updates to all of your devices that you might have connected here. So a bit of styling there. the actual audio is played like this. So just one line of code. You say steroids.audio.play, and you can also use Cordova sound APIs. But we just wanted to make super simple to play a sound, so we have this nice shortcut there. Then I said that this is especially good for data-driven apps, so I give a quick example of that. Just need to come on. So now I generated a data resource that uses local data. It looks like this. So you have some data of the first car and the second car. The data comes from local JSON file in www folder. So there's data, car JSON. So when you change this, car ID 3, third car. So then you update, and the app boots up with the new data. So then if you open models, so this is AngularJS based example. We love Angular, and the REST Angular library. So here you can see that it fetches the data from localhost. So you might put here your api.yourownbackend.com, and then it would fetch data from your own backend. And then there's the controllers. That are fairly simple. So there are two controllers, one for the index that just fetches the data and sets the native navigation bar title. And then there's the show controller that filters the data a bit. And then, of course, the views. Yep.
When I was building with PhoneGap and I wanted to get data out of my own backend, I had to fiddle with whitelists to make it work. What do I have to do here?
Yeah. By default, we have allowed all hosts for you, but we have the same config file. So the question is that with PhoneGap, you had to do something about the network permissions. So here. So then we have the same config XML files that PhoneGap has, but we have them by the platform. So config.android.xml sets the Android, PhoneGap, or Cordova preferences, and then config.ios.xml sets. So the default here is that everything is okay. All right. So the summary is that it's not really about going native or HTML or that, but you can do pretty awesome stuff with hybrid apps, especially if you use hybrid UI. And then you can go or stay making SPA apps or then go multi-page app, but you can also combine those two. So you can have some of your app implemented in a single-page app way, and then some of the app implemented as a multi-page app. And if something's missing, it's really easy to extend an existing PhoneGap plugin from some open source repo or write one of your own. And AngularJS is especially awesome for hybrid development. So, questions?
So you're not using the router for Angular?
You can use the router. If you go multi-page app, you don't have to, because then you just basically have the same kind of links as you would have in in your web page. And then if you want to use the native transitions, then you add some code to that. But I think that using router is a bit complicated because the URLs don't matter in a hybrid app. Any more questions? Yep.
What are some of the performance implications of the server versus the other way, or running multi-page versus single page, other than memory for speed?
So the question is that if you do single page or multi-page, how does it affect memory and performance?
Right.
So if you, this is a very good question actually. So I address first memory. So if you do SPA, then it's one document for the whole lifetime of the app. So it gets polluted with different things. You add to the DOM, you remove from the DOM, you replace the whole DOM, sometimes almost the whole thing. And then the memory management of the web use is not that good. So eventually the memory will just gets up and goes like there. But if you do multi-page app, then you're basically recreating the web views all the time. So only the bottom ones, like if you have 5 tabs, then only those they stay the same. But then as you navigate through the app, it creates a real native web view and then loads the document there, takes some memory. Then once you navigate away from it, the memory is freed. And then the performance. Did I address that already, or?
That was no.
Okay. Good.
How much do you charge to use Steroids or any other tool?
So Steroids is free to build. We have some additional services for data and updating your app live, but to build a basic app is free. You can go to appcover.com/steroids for the pricing. And it's just PhoneGap. We just add the hybrid UI on top of that. And you don't have to use hybrid UI if you don't want that. So we are like PhoneGap built but free. More? Yep.
Do you ever run into cross-origin request issues on hybrid, or is it just not? Do they not exist?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Cross-origin request issues, like you would with a browser.
Yeah.
Do you run into that here or no?
So the question is that do you run into cross-origin problems? Yeah. If you use the local host, then yes, because it's HTTP, but you can go around that by implementing coarse headers. And we're just about to fix that so that it's not an issue anymore. But basically, the same kind of issues that we would run. Yeah, but if you need to, for now, you can just use the file URL, because then everything works. Yep.
You showed iOS has a HTTP server. What about for Android?
We have the same for Android as well. So it's not a real server, but we fake it. So it's also way more faster to load the pages, even though it doesn't really matter because it's offline. Any more? Yep.
Yeah, I saw a push notification plugin. Was that part of?
So the push notifications are not part of our platform because it's a PhoneGap plugin. So you can just include that in your project and then do the push.
What if you're using a third-party provider like Urban Airship or something? Do you have to write native code?
No, because Urban Airship has its own PhoneGap plugin, but it's also compatible with the one that we support. You can use any plugin you want, but we officially support the push plugin. It's called that. So that supports multiple, like Urban Airship and Parse and those. All right. Any more questions? All right. Thank you.